This video encourages people to examine how they are contributing or not contributing to Black Lives Matter and other social movements. One way a lot of people are getting involved is by uplifting and supporting the voices of people of color. And I've been a recipient of some of that support, so I just wanted to take this time to show my gratitude. All of the new subscribers and followers and members and patrons, y'all are the best. Videos that cover intense political topics like this are pretty much disqualified from receiving ad revenue, but thankfully I have a sponsor for this video, which allows me the freedom to make videos about the things that really interest me. And another way that you all can support me is by checking out our sponsor, Raycon. Stick around to the end of the video to find out more. So a few weeks ago, I woke up and looked at Instagram and it was all black. Hi, I'm T1J.
Follow me.
Everyone was uploading blank black squares to social media, essentially to express solidarity with Black people and the Black Lives Matter movement in the wake of the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor, as well as the general perpetual violence and discrimination against Black people in America. Each post was labeled with the hashtag Blackout Tuesday. Blackout Tuesday began as an event called The Show Must Be Paused, organized by Jamila Thomas and Brianna Agyemang, two Black female music executives. Their goal was to pause business as usual, starting with the music industry, and force people to pay attention to and have conversations about these injustices. The Show Must Be Paused did not suggest symbolic gestures on social media. In fact, it mainly suggested three things. One, to stop business as usual and begin to have these difficult conversations about racism and police brutality. Two, to donate your time and money to the families of these victims, as well as to causes fighting injustice. And three, to take a break if you have been personally affected by these events and need a minute to work on your mental health. There was nothing about black squares. So anyway, I scrolled on Instagram for a little bit and the posts eventually started to change. People would upload the black square, or they're like edit the post that they already upload, but then they would change it to say, when you upload your black square, don't put hashtag Black Lives Matter because that's drowning out a hashtag that people might actually find useful at this time. And by the end of the day, a bunch of people on my feed were basically bickering about the correct way to post nothing on Instagram. And it just seemed overall that this was a silly, failed exercise. And I think we see this kind of thing a lot. And I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. The internet has made it so easy to communicate and share ideas. The technology we have available to make things happen very quickly is remarkable. So I don't want to come off as saying that just because something is easy means it is bad or not worth doing. You just have to kind of make sure you're actually doing something. Now, I think symbolic gestures can be fine. A popular one in our culture is the moment of silence, often done in reverence to the recently deceased. In fact, on Blackout Tuesday, many creators, companies, and outlets produced 9 minutes of silence or minimalized programming, reflecting the length of time that a police officer pressed his knee against George Floyd's neck, ultimately resulting in his death. And in other types of media, the moment of silence was simulated by images or posts, like a blank black square. But it's important to understand that Thomas and Agyemang did not call for a moment of silence. They very clearly demanded conversations and actions. So I think symbolic gestures can be fine as long as that's not all you're willing to do. Now, it truly does seem like something unique is happening right now. I can't deny that. But you shouldn't blame Black people if some of us are a little skeptical. This ain't the first time an unarmed Black person has been killed by the police. A lot of people say that it's a perfect storm of all these high-profile killings happening within days of each other, the continuing lunacy of Donald Trump, and the stir craziness caused by the coronavirus. And maybe that's true, but it does suck that it took all that for people to even pretend to care for more than a week. And we're in a situation where saying Black Lives Matter is less controversial than it ever has been. Not that it ever should have been. But we've even got brands and corporations tweeting out Black Lives Matter and stuff. It's actually becoming a good PR move. And I haven't kept up with all these companies who are tweeting out Black Lives Matter, or, whether they're actually getting involved or donating money. And to be honest, I don't really care. At the end of the day, I expect businesses to make the moves that make them look good and or makes them the most money. And to be clear, unless they're being obviously unethical, I'm generally okay with that. But like fucking Pop-Tarts is not a person. I don't give a shit if Pop-Tarts thinks that Black Lives Matter. Sure, a person or people runs that social media account, but they have to represent the brand in those tweets. I have no idea what their personal beliefs or their personal disposition is. Pop-Tarts specifically is pretty creepy because whoever runs the account tweets in the first person. Like, most brands say we or us, but not Pop-Tarts. So I always imagine like an anthropomorphic Pop-Tart speaking. It just weirds me out. Maybe that's just me. Sure, people run these companies, and I would love it if these people publicly came forward and donated and protested with the common folks. Somehow doubt it, but it would be cool. But if the only one actually saying Black Lives Matter is the brand Pop-Tarts, literally means nothing to me. Anyway, my point is that these days it is really easy to type out a hashtag or upload a black square. It has become socially acceptable. It's not brave or groundbreaking anymore. And overall, that might be a good thing. The more popular social justice ideas are, the more pressure is put on the people with the power to lift the barriers to social justice. But it could also be a double-edged sword. If wokeness is trendy, then people will signal wokeness simply for social clout, which could have the effect of drowning out the voices of people who are actually calling for real life action. A term that gets thrown around every now and then is virtue signaling. Usually it's meant to describe people who are pretending or exaggerating their outrage towards a particular social or political issue, not because they particularly care about it, but because they just want to make themselves look righteous or look agreeable. Now, I think that's fairly cynical. I don't think people are going around posting about all these social issues and saying things they don't actually believe, but that doesn't mean they aren't also doing it to publicly display their moral righteousness, or because they don't want to get called out for not saying anything. The Blackout Tuesday thing reminds me of that whole thing a few years ago where white people suggested wearing safety pins as a sign of solidarity against racism. I think reactions to this were mixed, but I was never a fan of it personally. It's like you put on a safety pin and all of a sudden I'm supposed to be convinced that you understand racism. Now, I'm sure most of everyone who wore the pin believes that they were an ally, but I mean, you can put on that pin and still go home and still clutch your purse whenever a black man walks by. You can wear the pin in public but still go to the office and refuse to hire Lakeisha even though her resume is just as good as Karen's. Anybody can put on a safety pin, and anybody can black out their Instagram for a day. That tells me nothing about who you are or what you understand about the world or what you're doing to help make it better for marginalized people. In fact, I specifically saw Blackout Tuesday posts from people who I had previously seen be racially insensitive. All these things seem to do is make you feel good that you did something, if not to actively encourage people to believe you're not racist. And I understand none of us want to be remembered as the person who did nothing. But if all you did was wear a safety pin or post a couple of hashtags or upload a black square, I'm sorry to tell you, you did nothing. Now listen, sometimes these kinds of gestures can actually help. For example, when you go on Twitter, a lot of people have their pronouns listed in their bio. At first glance, this seems useful for trans and non-binary people because our society is very used to associating certain pronouns with certain things, like the way people look or dress or the way they express themselves. So for people who might defy or complicate our understanding of what pronouns to use, it seems useful to just tell people up front which ones to use. So at first, I figured there's no reason for me to put my pronouns in my bio because I don't think I have ever dealt with someone calling me the wrong pronouns. And that's probably the case for most cis people. But I did notice that a lot of cis people put their pronouns in their bio. And I suspected that this was just more virtue signaling and performative activism. I just thought people wanted an easy way to signal to the world that they weren't transphobic without having to actually do any work or introspection. But after asking questions and having conversations, I learned that cis people putting their pronouns in their bio normalizes not assuming people's gender, which has obvious benefits for trans and non-binary people. If cis people are clarifying their pronouns, then that makes it safer and more socially acceptable for trans and non-binary people to do it. And I understand that different trans and non-binary people might have different ideas about how this works. That was just my basic understanding from the conversations that I had. So I put my pronouns in my bio. He, him, by the way. So sometimes things that seem performative can actually turn out to be helpful. Other things like art are inherently performative. So we might be tempted to dismiss things like these murals that are popping up all over the country. Is it just more symbolic wokeness that doesn't actually get anything done? And maybe there's a point there. These kinds of murals cost a lot of time, money, and human participation. You might wonder if all those resources could be more effectively spent. But I personally think there's a place for art within activism. In my opinion, a giant sign that says Black Lives Matter and defund the police right down the street from the White House is pretty powerful. Even outside of DC, I think all of these murals and other kinds of art can be potent and moving, as all art can. In other words, just like everything else, it's fucking complicated. But as allies, it's important to educate yourself and pay attention and listen, because probably that's the only way you'll know. The safety pin, as far as I know, was made up by white people in the UK to show support for people of color after Brexit and was later adopted by people in the US. And Blackout Tuesday happened because people misunderstood the original goals of the show must be paused. Both situations seem like a failure to engage and listen. Now, I've seen and heard a lot of people say that they're finally ready to look within themselves and figure out how they can change and be better. And I understand the impulse to do whatever you can that seems to help or show solidarity, especially if it's easy. And at the end of the day, that's fine. Most of that stuff is just kind of whatever. I mean, you should definitely take a moment to figure out whether the thing you're doing is actually hurting more than helping, or if it's like drowning out people's voices. But the issue is when we see all of these hashtags and all of these black squares and all of these Karen memes, but we don't also see people educating themselves and others, having hard conversations, donating to relevant causes, attending protests and rallies, and just in general being an active ally. A lot of people seem lost in terms of what they're supposed to do, but it's like, man, we've been screaming about this for years. Google is free. There are people like me who make content that is designed to help people think about race and racial situations in a more thoughtful way. But in general, marginalized people cannot hold your hand through this. We've got enough on our plate. I think a lot of white people have simply gotten comfortable in a society that's set up to advantage them. But here's the thing, white folks. If you want to be a part of this fight, you're gonna have to learn to be uncomfortable. You won't ever be able to walk in another person's shoes, but you should educate yourself about how our society systemically marginalizes and attacks minorities. And you should constantly think about that. And it should make you uncomfortable. And you should also constantly think about how you contribute to and benefit from these very systems. And that should make you uncomfortable. Discomfort is good. It inspires change and growth. If you'd rather not be uncomfortable and just want to post a hashtag and go about your day, that is your prerogative. But I hope you understand that the fact that you're even able to do that is evidence of the very privilege that is the result of these systemic problems. The very same privilege that makes you much less likely to be shot in the back or choked to death by a police officer. Lots of folks just don't have that luxury. But like I said, these are undoubtedly unique times. And even though it's taken us too long to get here, I am proud of those who are finally holding themselves to a higher standard and are finally committed to taking a look in themselves and see how they can change and how they can help make the world better for Black people and marginalized people in general. Just keep in mind, this is a bumpy road. You might get some likes on social media, you might get some Black people to raise their fists at you, but this ain't gonna be easy. And we'll see how down for the cause everybody is when people really do have to step outside of their comfort zone. That's just me though. What do you think? Thanks for watching, and thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Raycon offers stylish and discreet and affordable earbuds. They fit neatly and cleanly into your ear, and I really like the look. There's no cords or those weird stems. I love these things. They pair instantly and seamlessly with Bluetooth, and this is actually the most comfortable pair of earbuds I've ever owned. In fact, I kind of swore off earbuds for a while because I couldn't find any that sounded good, were comfortable, and were affordable. But I was pleasantly surprised after trying out Raycon. They check all three boxes, and Raycon's mission has been to offer the same quality and sound as any premium brand you've heard of, except at like half the cost. And I'd say they achieved that. Their latest model, the Everyday E25, is the best one yet, with 6 hours of playtime, more bass, and just better audio quality in general, wireless charging, and many colors to choose from. And still pretty much an unbeatable price. So if you'd like to check out Raycon, just click the link in the description below and you can get 15% off your order. And remember, by supporting sponsors like Raycon, you not only get access to a great product, but you also support me and help me take my content to the next level. I forgot to do this earlier in the video, but I do want to give a shout out to homies like Electric Lomain, Sleepy Slug, Zevi Ryan, and Duds6699. If you'd like to support this channel, you can become a homie yourself by clicking the join button below the video or by checking out my page on Patreon.